This CACFP meal pattern webinar on cultural foods was presented on July 28, 2020 to a center-sponsor audience. The version you are currently viewing has been edited and shortened from the original. Hello and welcome to the Child and Adult Care Food Program Meal Pattern webinar on cultural foods. The Child and Adult Care Food Program can also be shortened to CACFP, which is how we will be referring to the program for this webinar. My name is Shirley Wu, and I am a child nutrition specialist at the Oregon Department of Education, and I work with CACFP in Oregon. This webinar was funded by a grant from the USDA. For our webinar today, I will be asking a few poll questions and some free-form questions throughout our training. There's really no pressure to get the answers right, and sometimes there really is no right answers. I'm only looking for your experiences or your thoughts, but it will help me gauge whether you are following along or not. Since we are talking about cultural foods today, I thought a starter question about different food items might make things more interesting. Our first poll question, and I'm going to launch the poll right now, is on pemmican. Pemmican made by indigenous tribes in the Pacific Northwest is often made of, is it chokeberries and dried meats? Is it roots and shellfish? Is it kale and tofu? Or is it wild rice and boar? Or dried mushrooms and beans? So go ahead. And I know this is a tricky one, so don't worry if you don't get it right. What did most people say? It looks like the majority went with chokeberries and dried meat. All right, and the majority is right. It is chokeberries and dried meats. What pemmican is a mix of dried lean meats, berries, and fat. So it is often made by indigenous and native tribes all across the United States. And in the Pacific Northwest, it's often made of dried game meats or fish and mixed with dried fruits like cranberries, blueberries, cherries, and choke cherries. Depending on the recipe, it can have a shelf life of years. So that's usually if you have the drier jerky versions. There's an image of some sample pemmican on the slide, but know that it can come in many different forms, and so it doesn't always look like that. So what is interesting is that pemmican has been making their way into grocery stores nowadays, and it's also gaining in popularity with the paleo and keto diet crowd. All right, now that we got a taste of cultural foods, let's find out what we will be learning today. So first, we're going to define culture and cultural foods. Then we will find out why we want to serve cultural foods, briefly take a look at the demographics of Oregon, and then spend most of our time on figuring out a roadmap to serving cultural foods. We will focus on some real examples of successful products that have been served in child nutrition programs here, and all the resources that are out there for you to use. And we hope by the end that you'll learn some of the reasons for serving cultural foods, understand the steps needed to successfully add cultural foods onto your menu, and know where to find at least a few resources on cultural foods. Let's define culture first. Culture can be a slippery concept because it encompasses so many different things. It is the beliefs, values, and practices of any group of peoples, and can include, but is not limited to, language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and art. These cultural groups can be based on racial, ethnic, religious, lifestyle-oriented, or geographical classification. Culture can also be self-identified. Many people decide which cultures they want to be affiliated with, and it's important to note that it's typically not monolithic. So that means that individuals can associate with a culture and still not follow the same practices as another person who identifies with that same culture. Since we are talking about CACFP, which is, of course, a food program, we will focus on the cuisine aspect of culture. We will refer to this today as cultural foods, and it could include the general cuisine of a culture, or even just food items or customs that are closely associated with a specific group of people. For example, when we talk about cultural cuisines, halal cuisines are a set of customs, food, and dishes that are associated with Muslim people and cultures. An example of a cultural food item is chicha morada, which is a corn drink that is very closely associated with Peru and Peruvian food. Finally, for cultural food customs, we have eating with chopsticks, which is a custom that is associated with a wide variety of cultures across Asia. At this point, you might be thinking, well, if cultural foods are any food items closely associated with a specific group of people, then by serving hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and peanut butter sandwiches, I would be serving cultural foods too, right? And you would be serving the cultural foods associated with mainstream American culture. Since this is something that most sponsors are comfortable with serving, however, our focus today will be on cultural foods that are not as widely represented in the child nutrition programs, or possibly just not widely represented in your menu at this time. Of course, many of the lessons that will be part of our roadmap today will be applicable to any foods that's served in CACFP. So why do we want to learn about different cultural foods and serve it to participants in CACFP? Since you are taking this webinar today, I do assume that you have a few reasons you want to learn more about serving cultural foods. So feel free to share them in the chat box or Q&A box. While you are typing in your answers, here's some reasons we have heard over the years. So it can be about broadening viewpoints for your participants. It shows that not everyone eats the same way, and there might be different ways to think about food. It can also be a good learning opportunity to discover new cultures. So if you have a large ethnic or racial minority population that you serve, it can also be about making the families feel like they are welcome in your community. And other times it can just be about discovering new products or dishes that's out there, or by spicing up side dishes to keep your menus from being stale. One thing that people don't often think about when it comes to cultural food is meeting budgets. With rising meat prices, it can be helpful to find a wide variety of vegetarian recipes, especially ones from different cultures, to create new and exciting meat-free products. Let's see if there's some reasons that people are sharing. People are saying that there's very diverse families from different cultures. Some people want to celebrate the cultural identities of the children that they serve. And some other reasons include it's relatable to the children, helps them feel welcome, and other people just love making new items. So these are all great reasons to serve CACFP. We have more coming in. I love it. Keep on sharing. So it's to broaden horizons, and it's just to make something new and different. Great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your different reasons for serving cultural foods. It's great to see so many different reasons out there. No matter the reasons that you do have, it is important to know that the food you serve matters, because food acts as a cultural signifier. It can signify belonging to a cultural heritage. For example, in Mount Angel, Oregon, every year there is an Oktoberfest. Maybe not this year, but in most years. And the food served there is a large part of the celebrations of German heritage. Similarly, for first and second generation immigrants who are in the United States, food can be an important connection to their identity and heritage. It can also be an indication of where you grew up. Iced tea, which you see on the screen, it looks and tastes very different depending on where you grew up in the United States. Those of you in the South might be more familiar with sweet tea, while those of you who grew up in the Northeast or on the West Coast might be more familiar with non-sweetened teas being served. And if you're one of those younger folks who's listening on this webinar, you might even be more familiar with milk teas, which have been rising in popularity on the coasts. Culture does change, and it does differ based on the populations that's there. In many religions, there are restrictions and rules on what you can eat and when you can eat, often with a lot of cultural significance attached. And finally, the types of food and drink you consume can even be culturally significant to social groups as well. So think about what you eat and how your social group affects your day-to-day habits. What you eat today is likely not the same types of food you ate 10 or maybe even 20 years ago, and it likely won't be the same in another 10 to 20 years. Cultures do change, and they do continue to change over time. Food can be a very powerful signal. Sydney Mintz, who is a food anthropologist, wrote that what constitutes good food, like what constitutes good weather, a good spouse, a fulfilling life, is a social, not a biological matter. It means that what we choose to eat is shaped by our society, and expanding what we choose to feed those in our care can affect their lives in a lot of meaningful ways. So, who do we serve in Oregon? The participants in your care may come from many different cultural groups. In Oregon, the most commonly spoken languages besides English includes Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Russian. And out of the 4.2 million residents in Oregon, about 9.6% were born outside of the country. And the most common countries of origin are Mexico, Vietnam, and China. If you're in an area with less diversity, you may still have participants whose families partake in different cultural lifestyles. Here in Oregon, based on the number of vegan and vegetarian restaurants available, we also have one of the highest rates of vegetarians and vegans in the country. While Oregon may not be quite as ethnically or culturally diverse as other states, serving cultural foods may be even more important as a way to expand the knowledge of different cultures and ways of living. Food can be a source of cultural and group pride, but with care and attention, it can also be a source of shared joy between many different groups. Now we know why we should serve cultural foods, and we got a sense of the different populations that we're serving in Oregon. Let's step out of theory and into action. How can we serve cultural foods within CACFP? The first thing to understand is that foods outside of the mainstream American culture are often creditable for CACFP as well. So many ingredients used in other cultures often overlap, and with some slight changes to techniques or spices, can create whole new dishes. Also know that if you do not have the time to devote to developing new recipe, and who really does, there are credited multicultural recipes that are available, and we will have links to them later. And if you're not sure where to start with exploring different foods, there are food shows and industry events that can expose you to lots of different new products within a short amount of time. Once you are ready to start serving new dishes, you can hold samplings or tastings with your participants and incorporate activities such as celebrations or in-class lessons. These are all ways to make the new dishes more fun and less intimidating. Next, know that like most other foods you serve, cultural foods can be either expensive or budget-friendly, and it really all comes down to research and planning to make it fit within your budget. And finally, know that no matter what you serve, mealtimes aren't just about nutrition. They're also about making sure that their participants have excellent opportunities for socialization and enrichment. And cultural foods are a great way to maximize growth in those areas. Let's get onto our roadmap. While this roadmap is useful for serving cultural foods that you are not intimately familiar, it is also a good roadmap for adding any new food items to your menu. There are 7 steps that we are going to go over. As we go through all of these steps, don't think of them as static goals that have to be followed in a certain order. Think of it as a guide. You might start off with step 3 or step 5. It really all depends on your own personal workflow. So the first step is working with the community. The second is market research and testing. Third is sourcing creditable products. The fourth is documenting creditability. The fifth is menu planning and activities and events. The sixth is participant feedback. And the final step is review and analysis. We will go through these steps and integrate some wonderful examples and quotes from a few of our Oregon sponsors. Again, know that these steps are not set in stone. Sometimes you may get feedback from the community later on in your process. Sometimes you find a great creditable product first, and then you do market research on whether your participants like it or not. Other times, you know you have a hole in your menu and you just start thinking about ideas that could fill a gap or need. Be flexible. Flexibility is always key. And if you want to start with working with your community and local families first, you will want to collectively figure out what your goals are when you add new food items to the menu. You may have your own goals in mind already, but it's always a good idea to see if the families you serve have the same goals. To do this, you can start by talking with the teachers or program staff first, get a sense of what the participants want and where they feel there is some need. Another way to reach out is to have community conversations or provide surveys to the community. So I have a few quotes throughout this session or webinar with different people that I talked to. And the first that I have here is from Carla Butler from Oregon Child Development Coalition, also known as OCDC. And they shared that they serve a large Spanish-speaking population, and so they wanted to see what the goals were. They surveyed their staff for input. They also asked the parents for their input, which is part of the Head Start requirements. While all parents wanted to have a wide variety of foods, the requests varied from site to site, with some wanting more beans and rice, while others wanted less Hispanic foods. Which goes to show you there is a lot of variance in what communities want, and the only way to know what they want is to ask them. From Portland Public Schools, it was all about the community conversations. Here's a quote from Whitney Ellersick, the nutrition director at Portland Public. The Richmond community reached out to our former director to have conversations about culturally relevant school lunches and whether we could partner to develop a school lunch menu that resonated with the Japanese immersion program at Richmond Elementary. Whitney continues, they provided ideas for multiple types of dishes, and we worked with them to identify recipes that we could do with their help in the kitchen. We also talked about specific ingredients that respected the recipes and were ones that families would use at home. From their conversations with their community, they found their purpose, which is to provide culturally relevant school lunches that respected what families used at home. It always helps to have a goal first, so you know what you are planning to do. Your goals can be simple. It could be something as little as having your participants enjoy different types of fruits and vegetables that they don't get at home. Or it could be as complex as making sure that all your families feel represented. So another way to get input from your community is to have surveys. The benefit of surveys is that they have a wider reach and allow busy families who may not have time for an in-person conversation to provide their input as well. So survey questions can be either specific or broad. For example, you may have specific menu items already in mind, and your survey asks families and participants to choose their favorite out of a set menu that you have. In other instances, you may not have any particular items, and instead you can ask for suggestions on your survey. Paper surveys are most helpful for smaller centers where you can see at least one of the parents or guardians every day at drop-off or pickup. You can hand it to them in person for them to fill out right away if it's a quick survey. The main drawback of paper surveys is that if they leave your site, it can be very hard to get them back again. So for larger sites or sites where you already have established online methods of communication with your families, you can send out online surveys instead. There are several free online survey services. As of right now, I know about SurveyMonkey and Google Forms. This might be a good idea currently for all sponsors if you want to minimize in-person contact. Online surveys can be sent via parent newsletters or by email. What's really great about them is that they are convenient for most groups that have access to the internet, and it can be done at the family's convenience. Finally, don't think about surveys as being boring or stuffy. You can always make it part of your day as well. So survey the participants in your program by asking them to vote with dried beans, paper ballots, or just by raising their hands. Teachers or staff can integrate this into their lessons by making like or dislike charts. The options are endless. Now that you know some methods to get feedback on goals or menus, let's do another quick poll and see how you get feedback. So, how do you get feedback on what you serve on your menus? Do you have conversations with teachers or program staff? Do you have community conversations like PPS does? Do you do surveys with families? Do you do surveys with participants? Or do you do something else altogether? So if you do, put all those fine details into the Q&A or chat box. And while you guys are voting, I wanted to share a few other reasons why people serve different cultural foods. You have different families in your communities and you want to make families welcome. Because you have a large group of Hispanic families and want to include Mexican cultural foods, and you want to broaden the horizons of Native American and non-Native children at their new facility, and it gets children excited about their favorites. Great, great ones. I'm going to close the poll now. It looks like most people got a chance to vote. And it looks like the majority of you all have conversations with your teachers. A good percentage have surveys with families. A lot of people also have surveys with participants and community conversations as well. It looks like you all do a good variety of these already. And let me take a look at some of the other methods that's used. Some other people talk with their food service supervisors on what works in their counties. They want to do more with the children and parents, like dot surveys and tasting nights. That's a great idea where people can vote on the top 5 dishes they want on the menus. And they also think about religious or allergy issues as well, taking those into consideration, very important. And they communicated with their food vendor when children didn't eat certain foods. Great suggestions, everybody. Once you have an idea about what your community wants, you're going to need to figure out whether that goal is feasible with a little bit of market research. Market research is a very broad category and it encompasses research into the culture. And this is especially important if this is a culture that you are not familiar with. To facilitate your research, you can incorporate this as part of your community conversations or your surveys, just because you're likely to have a lot of expert knowledge already close at hand. Figure out what types of resources are available to you. Do you have cooks who are proficient in cooking foods from this culture like OCDC does? Do you know what your vendors or local grocery stores carry? Do you know how much you can spend? And this is closely connected to figuring out what products you may need to purchase. So for example, you may want to create an Ethiopian meal, but your vendor may not have a way to source the teff flour that's used to make the injera bread that you wanted. Or you may be able to buy the teff flour, but the cost of the product is way too high for your program. Which gets me to my next point. Figure out your budget for the menu item. Sometimes you can support a higher cost item for a limited amount of time, but not as a recurring expense. Finally, if one of your goals is to get a product that is well liked by your participants, you can always sample several different products with them and have them provide feedback early in the process, just like one of the comments said. Whitney from Portland Public did share her process for creating their yakisoba dish, which is what they settled on for Richmond Elementary. She said, I re-met Lola of Umi's Organic Noodles at a local food show or event hosted by EcoTrust in November 2018. We briefly discussed her noodles and decided we needed to follow up on the yakisoba conversation and the ability to make a whole grain rich noodle. In this case, Whitney was on the lookout for new resources and found that she had a local vendor who could help her in creating her yakisoba dish. Figuring out what your resources are. Whitney then tried out the meal at her local elementary school. We only tested it at Richmond Elementary first and asked for student feedback along the way. We decided that we could simplify the steps and that it would be something that all of our kitchens and team could make easily on their own without volunteer help. Often the cultural events or special lunches such as these require more hands in the kitchen, and we cannot do that at all sites at the same time. Ultimately, we saw such a strong response and increase in participation, we decided to expand it. So sometimes market research can take the form of a trial meal to help figure out logistics. In this case, Whitney was able to get good feedback from her trial run and was aware of what levels of staffing she had and what she needed to make the dish. All of this legwork is important in creating a successful new dish. You can also incorporate this into your menu planning or review and analysis step down the road as well. So again, flexibility is key. And from Whitney's example on getting the yakisoba noodles, we can see that having a product that meets child nutrition program requirements can present a hurdle. So sourcing creditable products is an important part of market research, enough so that we're breaking it out as its own step. While whole grain rich yakisoba noodles was not commonly available prior to Portland Public's yakisoba project, know that many cultural recipes have ingredients that are commonly available. Occasionally, you may find that specialty items need to be purchased to create a dish. For example, you may want to make a traditional gumbo, but you may need okra or filet powder for the dish you wanted to make. Or you may want to make tandoori chicken, but you need to source the spices for it. Figure out whether you're able to source that product first before you go into menu planning. You may not have the same market power as Portland Public to negotiate on product specifications, but you may be able to look for specialty products on a smaller scale. Once you find the product, figure out whether this dish is meant to be incorporated into your cycle menu or whether it's going to be a special event item only. Part of your consideration will be availability. Some products can only be purchased seasonally. For example, asparagus is only available during the spring. And also price. Can you afford asparagus on a consistent basis? Whitney shared some more details on where she goes to find new products. She says, I like to go to food shows or events where I know it will not just be school food. I like to ask brokers and other reps to tell me about their whole line, all of their items, not just the ones that they think we want to see. I visit new restaurants and try new foods all the time. I follow farmers markets, food carts, and restaurants on Instagram and other social media feeds to see what they are promoting or selling. I often find that people then introduce me to others in the industry, especially local people, and we can then start other conversations. I then try to pair that with what I hear my team and the students saying what they want to see on the menu and what we can pull off well in the kitchen with only ovens. Even if you don't have the funds to go to food shows or events, or even if there's no food shows or events right now, there's a lot of social media apps you can use as part of your research. So most importantly, use your team and your community as a resource. They are a great source of new ideas. Ask them what they like to cook and what they enjoy eating. Once again, I want to see what you're doing to find food inspirations for your menus. I'm going to launch my third poll right now. Do you find food inspiration from your staff or community, from conferences and food shows, from vendors or grocery stores, restaurants and social media, or some other way entirely? You can check all that apply, and I will read any other methods you use to the audience. All right, we have a few other details coming out already. People like to see what other food service partners do. They like to see what farmers markets have in season. Somebody mentioned the USDA recipe website, so perfect. Cultural family recipes, that's great as well. I'm going to close the poll and share what most people are saying. So it looks like the majority are finding food inspirations from very close by, from their staff or community. A lot of people are going to conferences and food shows. And from your vendor and grocery stores, just some people. and from restaurants and social media as well. That's great. Other people have a restaurant background, so they asked people what they like and they can make it. And they look at USDA, other CACFP groups, or parent suggestions. All great ideas and all great ways to find inspiration. So thank you everybody for sharing. As we can see, there's a lot of different ways to find out about all the different cultural foods out there. Before you get started with your ideas, though, it's a good idea to know what will be creditable and what will not be creditable. As mentioned earlier, most cultural foods are creditable, and there's been some changes that allows for more types of cultural foods in CACFP and all child nutrition programs. In fiscal year 2020, which is our current fiscal year, dried meats, poultry, and seafood, surimi, which is imitation crab, tempeh, coconut, pasta made of vegetable flour, hominy, corn masa, masa harina, and corn flour, as well as popcorn, have all been added as creditable foods. This is in response to the changing food landscape that we have. So remember, culture is always changing. Detailed information was provided in our ODE meal pattern webinar in January of this year. In addition, in 2015, there was guidance that came out about allowing the purchase and donation of traditional foods that are served by tribal organizations. If you want more information about this, look for the CACFP memo 19-2015 in the ODE memo page. Traditional foods in this instance is referring to foods that are commonly prepared and consumed by Indian tribes. For more information on what foods are or are not creditable, refer to the CACFP Crediting Handbook. Once you have a general idea of what is creditable and what is not, work with your vendors to make sure that they have the available items. If you're working with a large vendor, your account representative should be able to tell you what types of product are available. The more experienced representatives may be able to tell you whether the products will be creditable or not for CACFP. And if you're working with a vendor who produces the items, like Portland Public did, they may be able to create a product or adjust your product based on your needs. Whitney did mention that yes, she had to make many adjustments to her recipes and products, and it was very hard to find a whole grain rich noodle that met our needs, but they often included dyes and other ingredients that we were hoping to minimize the use of in our meals. We also had to address allergens or vegetarian vegan options with the entree, since many of the sauces also contained fish sauce or other ingredients that would limit participation for some students. And this is a good point. Know what allergies and special dietary needs you have to accommodate within your participants. I think there was somebody who commented on that earlier. Sauces such as fish sauce and soy sauce and pre-mixed spice blends may contain allergens, so check your labels first. For example, most soy sauces do contain gluten, which can be a problem for participants who need a gluten-free diet. In all cases, make sure that the items are creditable prior to purchase if you are using the item as a creditable component. If the item is a processed combination food, make sure you ask for a product formulation statement or child nutrition labels. If you're buying single component items, you can look at the crediting handbook for CACFP or the food buying guide. And we have had other trainings on the food buying guide before. And if you're not familiar with it, go to the link on the slide. You can search as a guest, although our recommendation is to create an account so you can save items that you are researching. Go to the food item search, type in the keywords for the food you want to review, and click on the search results to see if the item is creditable, and if so, what components it credits for and how you calculate the portion size. And the food buying guide can be used whether you're working with large vendors or if you are buying items in grocery stores. If you're buying in grocery stores, though, your procurement will likely look a little different. Finding specialty items may be harder, and certain items may only be found in ethnic food aisles, if at all. If you can't find items in your regular grocery store, look at the local markets that serve ethnic populations. Hispanic markets or Asian markets may have more choices for spices, sauces, or specialty vegetables and fruits. And even if your local grocery stores carry some of those ethnic products already, there's might be more choices. Your families and staff can also be a great source of information. Carla from OCDC mentioned that most of the items can be purchased from their main vendor. They did have specific chilies that they wanted for their pozoles, and they could not find them through their main vendor. So she worked with her cooks, most of whom are Hispanic, and they knew which stores would carry them. So again, use your local resources. While local ethnic markets and your general grocery stores may have great food items, do be cautious about buying processed combination foods. This is because all processed combination foods do require a product formulation statement in order to be creditable, and this might be harder to find from a smaller market. In all cases, when you are serving processed combination foods, make sure to have a product formulation statement or a child nutrition label. For some special combination foods with a standard of identity, you can save the product label that shows that the product name matches with the exact standard of identity. For example, if you bought chili with beans, it has a standard of identity. If you are not familiar with product formulation statements, child nutrition labels, or standards of identity, look at the ODE CMP CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page linked on this slide. I know it's a mouthful. So it does provide guidance and additional information on all of these topics. And if you're making the combination foods in your kitchen instead, this will mean that the combination food is considered homemade and you will need to have a recipe instead. The recipe must have crediting information showing which components are credited and how much they credit for per serving. And the recipe on this slide is from Oregon State University's Food Hero website, and they have the crediting information on the top of the recipe. If you're unsure of how your recipe contributes to the meal pattern components, use the Recipe Analysis Workbook from the Food Buying Guide. It calculates how each recipe contributes to the meal pattern components using the ingredients and quantities entered for each recipe. All right, and if you are using the Recipe Analysis Workbook and calculating out crediting becomes too much for you, there's really no shame in it. It's pretty hard. And so there's a few sites out there which have credited and standardized recipes for CACFP. There's 3 main sites, Food Hero, which I mentioned before, and they also have a wide variety of quantity recipes that are using locally available ingredients. And some of these recipes do showcase different cultures too. We also have the Child Nutrition Recipe Box, which includes multiple credited recipes. And this website is run by the Institute of Child Nutrition, which is contracted with the USDA to provide child nutrition program trainings and information. And finally, we have the USDA page on multicultural childcare recipes. These are recipes grouped by region, and they have a strong emphasis on using different vegetables. All 3 sites are linked on this slide, and you can see the images of the Food Hero Quantity Recipe site and the ICN Child Nutrition Recipe Box site on your screen. Just as a quick caveat, know that these sites can have recipes for non-CACFP programs, and that some recipes for grain-based desserts will not be creditable for CACFP. And so here's a few sample budget-friendly cultural recipes. You have black beans with plantains from the USDA Multicultural Recipes page. You also have chickpeas and tomatoes from the same page, and noodles with peanut butter sauce. From Food Hero, you have hummus without tahini, because tahini is pretty expensive, and then also Mexican black bean soup. All of these recipes are vegetarian, if not vegan, and can be used as part of a main dish. So once you have figured out your goals, you completed your market research, you sourced your products, and documented credibility, well, what next? Once you determine that this is a dish you want to serve and can support serving as part of a CACFP meal, you have to figure out where it goes on your menu. On this slide, we have a week from OCDC's cycle menu, And OCDC has generously shared their cycle menu with us, so you can download the menu to see how they integrated different food hero recipes into their 6-week cycle. And when you're planning your menu, know that cultural foods don't always have to be the main event. You can use side dishes as well to create colorful plates and introduce new items. The USDA multicultural childcare recipes have a lot of great side dishes. Next, work with your audience on the frequency of these cultural foods. Remember, as Carla mentioned, some sites wanted more Hispanic foods while others wanted less. So always go by what your participants and families want. Also, snacks are a great time to serve new and possibly challenging foods. Usually, participants are less hungry at snack. And so hunger can sometimes make children, especially young children, more anxious about getting foods that will fill them up. By serving new and challenging foods at snack time, you can try out new foods in smaller portions at a time when your participants may be more open to having adventurous fares. And finally, pair your higher cost items with budget-friendly items. If you serve an expensive main, it might be helpful to pair it with a budget-friendly recipe in the same week, maybe one of the ones we showcased before. So every sponsor has a different budget and different capabilities, so figure out what works for you. And Whitney shared that yes, the yakisoba was on the higher end of the cost scale, but we balance that throughout the week or menu with other entrees that are not as expensive. We use our USDA foods, diverted chicken strip in the recipe for the protein. We are also able to use our farm to school funds to purchase the noodles. Whitney brings up a few different resources to get overall cost in line with her budget. You may or may not have access to USDA foods. Most school districts do have a USDA foods account. If you have questions about it, work with Chris Fasha or Sarah English at the ODE office. However, Farm to CACFP is an option for all CACFP sponsors in Oregon. Earlier this fiscal year, Rick Sherman and his team reached out to all Oregon sponsors about funding that's available for locally grown and produced products. If you haven't used this resource already, reach out to Rick Sherman or Amy Williams at ODE for more information. One last poll, and we're going to make it quick. So you learned a few tips for menu planning, but what typically is the biggest factor for you when you menu plan? Is it product availability, participant preference, budget, nutritional balance, or something else entirely? If it's something else, put those details in the Q&A or chat box. And it looks like it's, a pretty fair balance. So it looks like product availability determines most, along with nutritional balance too. So nutritional balance seems to be pretty important for quite a few people. Budget is also a big one too, and participant preference a little bit lower on the scale for most people, but still high up there. Let me see what some of the other reasons are for menu planning, biggest factors. For some people, they consider both preferences and also nutritional balance. So I'm guessing for most of you, it is probably a balance between all of those. So while you are menu planning, see if there are holidays or calendar events or lesson plans coming up that would be a good fit for your items. Work with the teachers and staff to incorporate these cultural lessons related to the menu. Having the meals closer to a related holiday can be a great way for participants to recognize and be more open to new items that they may have seen on the news or in the social media that they frequent, or even in advertisement. If you do have funding for it, it's always fun to decorate and add relevant activities. Here's some photos of activities and decorations from Richmond Elementary for their special yakisoba meal. It includes a Japanese meal pattern plate, which is fun, and a koi no bori or carp kite for decoration. After you serve a new item on your menu, get feedback from your participants and staff. So this is helpful not only to helping you figure out if you'll be serving it again in the future, but also in helping you determine what other food items might be suitable for your population. Feedback can be provided informally or formally. Usually, if you have younger participants, informal methods will usually work best. Ask your staff who work in meal service areas what they see and hear. Oftentimes, your frontline staff will have a good idea of whether the dish should be served again. Staff feedback can also include information on how to hold the food. For example, some foods get soggy if they're held too long, how to prepare it more efficiently. Whitney mentioned how she made the recipe simpler with input from her staff. Remember that market research and recipe development can continue even after you serve the food items. And feedback, of course, can be data related as well. So you can always compare participation rates if it's an opt in meal program, or compare production records and food waste records. Remember that participants don't always react to food the same way every time. Sometimes the excitement of having a new item can make it seem like you should always have the item on the menu week after week, and you find that participants get tired of it after a few meals. Other times you might have a lukewarm response initially, but eventually, as your participants get used to it, you might have better acceptance. Know that not all of your menu items will hit a home run, and that's okay. So think back to your goals and why you are serving these dishes. Olga Dimonin from East Portland Daycare Services says that Slavic recipes are always in demand with their senior citizen participants. Their adult daycare serves a lot of Eastern European populations. So when we don't serve one or the other for some time, people start asking to have them. Olga mentioned that beet soup and roasted buckwheat groat cereals are very popular. So know your audience and understand what they want. The goals for an adult daycare in Portland is very different for one for childcare in Wilsonville. Carla from OCDC said, for her Head Start children, items with meats, cheese, and tomatoes are always popular. The kids tend to like enchiladas, tortilla casseroles, chicken soup, and lentil soup. Sometimes it's about the seasonings that are used. And Whitney at PPS notes that because our team at Richmond could make the yakisoba, we trained our staff with tips on how to make it easier to prepare. We also listened to the feedback from them about what steps were easier or how to modify the process to help make everyone feel comfortable with the recipe. So again, feedback can be helpful from all sources. And when you're done collecting feedback, go through all of it, figure out what worked, what did not work. Are there any modifications that can be made to make your item better? What would make it more acceptable if taste was an issue? Is there a different way to cook it? Do ingredients need to be swapped out? Does it hold up well in transportation? What about workflow? Can your staff manage this recipe with the equipment they have? What about cost? Does it make sense in your budget? After you figure out all these questions, the final step is to figure out whether this will be saved for the future or discarded. I wanted to add in one final statement from Whitney that I thought was incredibly powerful. And she said, it is important that students not only like what we are offering, but also see themselves and their culture reflected in all parts of the school, including the food. Can you incorporate their ideas into a menu that complements a cultural school celebration? It may take time, so make sure you are upfront with them being the community, about the process, and that you may also need support promoting and service, etc. Be open to hearing their ideas. Be thoughtful and respectful with the recipe and transparent with any need to modify the recipe. We found this out when we were working through sauces. Each ingredient or step may be important, so being upfront and transparent about your own obstacles or concerns is helpful. The community may also be able to help you find the solution. So remember that you are not alone, even if you are serving young children and infants in childcare or children in an after-school program or adults in an adult daycare. It's always important to not just reflect the cultures in your organization, but also reflect the world around us. And when you hit upon a winning formula, share your successes. Let your families know about especially popular dishes or cultural events that you're holding at your site. Let the wider community know through social media, newsletters, or even involve your local media. You've seen pictures of Portland Public's yakisoba dish on the slide and throughout this webinar. And so these look great. They're so colorful, they're vibrant, and they did a great job in showcasing the work that they put in. And this is a great way to support your nutrition staff and other frontline staff and show that their efforts are appreciated. It can also be a great way to telegraph your values as a program. And when you promote your successes, sometimes it can really take off. I wanted to share that Portland Public Schools won a national award from the Food Management News Organization for their yakisoba. Hard work really pays off sometimes, and it could be especially gratifying when it's something that requires extra effort and aligns with your values. The award even hit the local news. You may have seen it in the fall on print media and even on radio stations. And so while you may not be courting the local news stations, you can still promote your meals by posting it on your website like PPS did, and let your families and parents know about all the great work that you're doing. Before we end this webinar, I do want to finish with a few notes on serving cultural foods. Know that celebrations of cultures can take many forms. It doesn't always have to be a spectacle, and everyone has their own interpretation of what makes a successful cultural meal. And whatever you choose to serve, do make sure that it models respect for different cultures. A good way to do this is to involve families and community members. And it looks like most of you are already doing that. Your cultural foods do not have to be main dishes. Side dishes are also great opportunities to introduce unfamiliar foods, and new foods are always a learning experience. But the thing to keep in mind is that food is fun, so make it something that your participants will enjoy. And Cesar Chavez said, if you really want to make a friend, go to someone's house and eat with him. The people who give you their food give you their heart. And as sponsors of CACFP, I know that all of you are giving your hearts to your participants each day. So thank you everyone for doing great work each and every day. And a special thank you to all the sponsors who shared not only a piece of their heart, but also their hard-earned knowledge. Big thank you to Whitney Ellersick from Portland Public Schools, Carla Butler from Oregon Child Development Coalition, Galina Nesgrasova and Olga Dimonin from East Portland Daycare Services, and Kaylee Summers from Adelante Mujeres. Special thanks also to Sean Linehan at Sean Linehan Photography for taking these wonderful photos of the yakisoba celebrations and allowing us to share them. This institution is an equal opportunity provider.